My name is Leslie Hendrickson. I'm on the steering committee of the festival, and this is our 18th edition of the Newburyport Literary Festival. So thank you again for being here. This is, of course, our virtual day. This is our first year that we've tried the hybrid model. Yesterday, we had a great day here in person in Newburyport. It's our first festival back from the pandemic, so we were so pleased at our great response, and thank you for everyone who made that a reality. I also want to give a shout out to our sponsors, the Institute for Savings and the Newburyport Bank. These banks have made this event possible since 2005, and we really appreciate it. We've also received funding from the Massachusetts Cultural Council, as well as local chapters in Newburyport, Newbury, West Newbury, Georgetown, Rowley, and Salisbury. Thank you. The Yellow School is a huge supporter of the festival this year, and the Mass Center for the Book also partnered with us. So thank you to them too. I also want to shout out our bookstore partners, the Bookshop of Beverly Farms and Jabberwocky. Find all of the books from the festival at those stores or your local bookstore. And I also have to say, unfortunately, JD Jackson, who is going to join us on this panel, is not able. He's ill. So we wish him a quick recovery, and we're sorry he's not here. Let me introduce our speakers. Edoardo Ballerini is a 2-time winner and 4-time nominee of Audio Publishers Association's Best Male Narrator Audio Award, the audiobook industry's top prize. On screen, he has appeared in 50 films and TV series, including roles in The Sopranos, Boardwalk Empire, and 24. He will next be seen as a regular in the series in Hulu's Retreat. Julia Whelan is a screenwriter, lifelong actor, and audiobook narrator of over 500 titles. In 2019, she won the Best Female Narrator Audie for Tara Westover's Educated. Her new novel, Thank You for Listening, was a Best of 2022 pick at Amazon, Audible, and NPR. It lost the Goodreads Choice Award in Romance, however, to a book she narrated, Book Lovers by Emily Henry, which she absolutely agrees she should have won. And Imogen Church is an award-winning actor and scriptwriter. Her debut novel, Death and the Burlesque Maiden, was published by Audible Originals in 2021. She has won many awards for narrating audiobooks, like an absolute boss. And on that, I will leave you in her capable hands. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. And again, we're really sorry to not have JD here. I hope he gets well soon. Sending you lots of love. However, it does mean I can grill these two with even more.
Oh, God.
And I'm really excited to do that. So welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to start with some kind of general questions, the kind of stuff that we get asked a lot, but I know everyone still wants to know. And then we're going to move into some slightly outre questions that only an audiobook narrator would ask another audiobook narrator. So you get some weird inside knowledge there. But first and foremost, I'm going to start with the most general question of all that everyone always wants to know. How the hell did you end up in audiobooks? Edoardo, go.
Ask myself that every day.
I know. I think we all do. I will go first. So I think, like a lot of people, somebody simply asked me if I wanted to narrate an audiobook, and I said, "Sure."
Okay.
What's that exactly? And then I went into their little closet in Los Angeles and recorded. Here was the caveat: is it had to be a public domain title, because she wanted to start a publishing firm, and she said we can only do public domain. So I chose Machiavelli's The Prince, just a light little thing to do. And I enjoyed it. And then I came into this industry right around the time as it was taking off, which was like 2007, 2008, 2009. And so a lot of actors were suddenly needed. And so that was my experience. It was like the industry was growing, actors were in demand, and quite literally somebody just said, do you want to do this? And here I am all these years later.
That is a truly underwhelming story. I love it.
Yeah.
Julia.
It's basically, it's cut and paste, honestly, for me too. I had a good friend of mine in college. Her mom happened to be an audiobook director and producer, and she knew I had a child actor background and then this creative writing degree. And she was like, I think you'd be good at this. And I was like, if I knew what it was, I might agree with you. And I did a demo for her, and I just kind of like fell backwards into it. And about the same time as Edoardo, actually, I think I did my first book in 2009, and by
Can you remember
2012.
what it was?
Oh yeah, I did 2 YA novels at the same time. One was Need by Carrie Jones, and the other was Peace, Love, and Baby Ducks by Lauren Myracle. And I was just like, got into the booth and just went, oh yeah, this is perfect. I love this so much. So not exactly the prince.
Yeah.
Didn't do that, but he was overachieving from the beginning. Very huge. So, and you, my dear?
Always. Well, my first title was, of course, A Mills and Boone. Historical sexy times in a book called The Conqueror's Lady. Yeah, so I started by
Some
reading.
Viking? Was it Viking or Norman or?
No, it was Norman. It was Norman.
Okay.
It was
Good.
Storman. Yeah, I started reading books for the blind, and then some of the big publishers would go to the Royal National Institute for Blind People and say, who's good? And they'd say, her, take her.
Right.
There was also a particular rule at the Royal National Institute for the Blind, which was that only two blind people had to request a title, and they had to record it. So there were these two guys in Stockport who would just coordinate for dirty books.
Right.
So yeah,
That's incredible.
I did audio erotica first and for quite some time.
Who didn't?
Right. Next question. This I get asked constantly, so I apologize, but everyone always wants to know, Julia, roughly how long does it take to prep an audiobook and how long to record?
Okay, the very rough math here, because it absolutely depends on the book and the complexity of the book, but in the studio is about 2 to 1. So about for every 2 hours that I'm in the studio, I end up with about an hour of finished audio. But then backing out of that, the prep for the book, reading the book ahead of time, creating word lists and character lists, and getting answers back on those questions, and kind of building the cast out is I'd say then it's about 4 to 1. So you know, depending on the book, but about a 10-hour book is about 40 hours of work, I would say.
Wow.
Nice. And another slightly generic question for you, Edoardo. Tell me what your typical recording day looks like.
So I have learned that I only have about 5 hours of work in me in any given day. After that, my brain melts, my voice fries, and my eyes, I think, just fall out of their sockets at that point. And so I have figured out, and the best time for me is between 9 and 2, which 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., which works well because I have 2 small children that go off to school. So I get them off to school, I do my work, and then they come back, and then I have the afternoon. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, my life got shifted to nighttime because they were home all day. And so suddenly my schedule was more like 9 p.m. to 2 a.m.
Well, that's
which
rough.
I think, and here's something that happens to a lot of narrators, and Julia can say what she wants about this as well, is that you do get to a point where you're recording so much and so often, for those of us who are doing it a lot, that you hit this place where you hit a wall and you just think, you know, it's an amazing field, but you can't do it alone forever. And I have noticed, and it was interesting hearing both of your bios, is that you've both written things. And I feel like more and more narrators are starting to do that, which is great. I think it's fantastic. We have an inside track to publishing, which other people don't. But anyway, that's my typical day. I have about 5 hours of good work in me, and that's about it.
In fact, I wholly agree with you, also having a kid who's almost 11. And that does lead me to a completely unexpected question that's just popped into my head. Are your kids even remotely impressed by what you do?
No, not really. They were for about 5 minutes, and then now they're much more impressed with the on-screen stuff. I think because that just is the bigger spotlight in the entertainment world, right? But now I think for a couple of minutes there, they were like, "Oh, look, Dad got some awards. That's cool." And then they were like, "Yeah, whatever." Yeah.
Back to Fortnite.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right. Julia, as I can see you in your delicious egg box booth, I'm going to ask you, do you prefer nowadays to work from a studio, an external studio, or a home studio, and why?
I so rarely work in an external studio anymore. I moved out of LA about 2 hours about 6 years ago, and so from that point on, I never go into a studio anymore. Except the last time I was in a studio was with Edoardo when we did Cormac McCarthy's Stella Maris together in August, and that was a treat. And so because it was done kind of like a play, it's all dialogue and it's between a therapist and a patient, and so we just got to sit there and actually act together. It was
That was a lot of
amazing.
fun. Yeah.
So I mean, honestly, it's something nice about going into the studio. It feels, this is going to sound weird, but it doesn't make it feel like a real job when you're in a studio as opposed to like in your house. But for like my own schedule and just, this kind of like the balance of everything I'm trying to do, I do prefer having control over my time and recording from home.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Now, Edoardo, I have listened to your Robert McCammon series, which I absolutely love, and you are doing ninja level accent work. So how hard is it for you to jump between different accents, especially when you're conversing with yourself? And are there any accents that when you see it pop up in a book, you just want to cry?
Oh yeah, definitely there are a couple of accents that make me want to cry. I'm not going to name them because I think that might cause some publishers to say, we'll never hire him for these books.
Okay,
but there are a couple. Now, the McCammon series is interesting because it was very early on in my career that happened. Those books actually started in 2012, and I had no idea what I was doing. And I think that served me well because I just dove in, and I was, I think there's something about a certain level of naivete which works in acting and art. If you just don't know, and you're just very truthful, you're very raw, and you just jump in. And yeah, so you're absolutely right. It's this wonderful series set in the 1700s colonial America. There's so many characters going in and out, and I just kind of dove in. I unconsciously just kind of ripped through it very quickly, actually, and it came out very well. And so then I thought, it was actually a lesson to me very early on, is like, don't overthink things, don't over prepare. You asked a question earlier of Julia, which is like, the ratio of preparation to recording. It's different for every narrator. I like to do a little bit less actually than most people, because I like to be it's more of like I'm on my toes and I'm on the high wire. And I have to kind of figure a few things out as I'm going. Obviously, I prep enough to know, the story and the characters, but I don't want to overdo it. It was because of those early experiences where I just really didn't know what the hell I was doing that served me well. I've tried to continue that.
Nice. Someone's put in the questions, Julia, or I think it was you that mentioned this. If you can just explain it for people, what are word lists and character lists?
Yes.
Oh yeah, sure. So when I'm prepping, I'm keeping a list of words that I don't know how to pronounce, and sometimes they're real words, but usually they're author invention words that I need to get checked. I need to go back to the producer or the author and say, how would you like me to say this? Especially in like fantasy novels or something, this character with 14 vowels in their name and 3 apostrophes. How would you like me to say that? And then I'm also keeping a character list of any speaking character with any vocal trait that the author is giving them. So whether that's an accent or a tone, and then also any biographical information that I think is important to remember. And then I create a kind of constellation. A lot of this is unconscious at this point, but this is sort of the process that I figured out along the way. I create a constellation of the characters that are most in conversation with each other, so that I can focus on differentiating those voices first and foremost, and then kind of build out the secondary characters around them. And to Edoardo's point, like, when we started, this was on paper. Like I would get like the paper scripts and I was highlighting like each character in a different color, and then realizing that was just slowing down my read because I'm like translating. I'm like, wait, who was orange again? Like so now it's like there's no notes on my screen. I don't prep to that extent, but especially with characters, I feel that the differentiation is important.
Yeah, definitely. I once made the mistake of asking an author what kind of accent my character would have in a fantasy novel that was a third generation who'd colonized a dark planet. The whole thing was first person from a woman with a hair lip. And I wrote to the writer and said, so this world was colonized by a woman from Brooklyn and a guy from Brixton. So how does this woman sound?
Wow.
And he said, well, the accent's a combination of Brooklyn.
She was like Australian.
Right.
She was Australian.
I just
Wow.
made up an accent and spent 4 days in the studio trying to keep it consistent with a hair lip. So that was
Wow.
fun. So be careful what you wish
Well
for.
done.
Yes, there comes a point where you're like, I'm not asking them about this.
Exactly. Right, Edoardo, and
Yeah.
I may ask you both this actually. Is there anything that you can tell the audience about being an audiobook narrator that you think would surprise them? I'm gonna offer, first of all, that when it gets really hot, we narrate in our pants. And I mean British pants, like knickers.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's my nugget. What have you got?
No, that's exactly right. It's amazing what we wear into the studio. I remember one summer it was blazing hot and I was down in my underpants and I was working on a book of essays by Albert Camus. And I thought,
Wow.
I was
I
like,
like life.
yeah, I was like, did Albert Camus ever imagine that someday a guy would be in his basement in his underpants reading? Well, maybe with Camus and the kind of crazy
Reading
Camus
to
pen,
himself. Yes, he did. He
reading to
absolutely did.
himself. I'll say that one of the things that people may not know about narrators, at least this happens to me, is, and this is an unfortunate side of the business, is that I don't really read much outside of the books I'm actually recording. And I think people have the impression that audiobook narrators are just readers, which we are, but reading all the time, which I don't think is the case. A lot of people have said this as well, that after their 5 or 6 hours and then they're prepping the next book and all of that, kind of the last thing you want to do at night is crack open a book. And that is kind of one of the downsides of the business. And that may be surprising to people.
Yeah, it makes it hard to read for pleasure.
Oh, I can't read a book without thinking, how would I narrate this? You know?
Yeah.
I've
It takes,
sometimes
like,
on a
50
paper
pages.
book in bed end up with my finger as though I'm annotating it.
Right.
Be like,
Yeah.
scroll. No.
Yeah.
Julia, anything you can think of that would surprise people about being a narrator?
I mean, everything that you all said for sure. And then I think on like the business side, I think people don't realize that we get paid for how long the book ends up being. So all of the prep that goes into it is not accounted for. We don't get royalties. Like it is just a fee for how long the book ends up being. And that's why, I mean, when in my bio, when it's like 500 books, that's not something I'm proud of. That's like what I had to do to make ends meet. Like that's what being a working narrator requires is, 50 to 70 books a year, probably. I don't know. It's different in the UK, right? It's even worse.
Oh yeah, it's even worse here. Yeah. It's even worse.
Right. At
It's
least,
getting
yes, we
better,
have help.
actually. It's getting better, but yeah, and with post COVID and Brexit, cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
That's a really fair point, actually. It's a fair point. And also, if you're doing a non-fiction book that's, I don't know, a historical tome about ancient Occitan, you might be looking up 1,000 words.
Yeah.
You're not getting paid for that.
Right.
There's no danger money for narrating academic texts.
Which is why I think, to Eduardo's point earlier, a lot of us are writing because it's you read so widely, you kind of learn like what makes a book, and you're like, I would like to just have the control. I would like to have the clay. Like, let me create this at this point and see if I can own something, So,
but I'm gonna jump to a question I had for later, but you've led me beautifully into it, Julia. Obviously, I have some experience with this as well. Is it harder narrating your own words? And did you write anything into your books that you then went, why did I write myself that? Like the line I wrote, which described incongruous linoleum.
Oh, babe.
Seriously, I knew I would be narrating it. It was commissioned by Audible Originals.
Right.
6 characters, first person, Incongruous linoleum. So how was it for you narrating your own words?
So I had two experiences, and I learned a lot from my first book. My first book was the worst recording experience I've ever had in a booth, because I couldn't turn off my editorial brain. So I was very like, I had imposter syndrome about the fact that I finally had a novel coming out anyway, and I was just like melting down around that. And then I had written this thing where there's 1 American and 13 Brits, and so I was doing, like, I was so focused on accent work. So for the next book, I was like, I'm going to read every draft out loud, every single draft out loud. As part of my editorial process, I am going to know this book so well by the time I actually get in the booth with it. And even then there was stuff that I'm like, I'm just like randomly assigning characters accents. Like, why are we doing this? But it was so much more fun. It's also just a much more fun book, but yeah.
It's an experience. It's different.
It's an experience, yes.
Yeah.
Eduardo?
Yes.
Incongruous linoleum is like the worst band name ever. I just want to throw that out there. I would never go see that.
Incongruous linoleum.
Right.
Yeah, man.
So the only experience with writing my own words is a collaboration, actually, for an Audible original. And I do not take credit for most of the words that appear there. That was Jess Walter. We worked on the story together, and then he went off and did the bulk of the writing. But then we had an amazing experience. He came to New York for a week, and we did essentially table reads. And so I would read the work aloud, and then we would sort of edit and tweak after that. And so what we did is we really honed the whole piece to what I felt most comfortable with. And that was an interesting process, to really take a written piece and say, how do I want to say this? How can I say this best? And we would massage a lot of the sentences and characters to fit my vocal sort of tendencies and strengths. That was terrific. And I wish there were more of that collaboration kind of thing between authors and narrators, because I think you really get a strong product that way. Because you're not trying to shoehorn, a narrator into a book.
Yeah.
So.
I did the Cheltenham Literary Festival with a huge author called Mark Billingham, who you might have heard of, crime author, and he used to be an actor. He doesn't provide his publishers with his final text until he does the audiobook.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was genius. So he reads and then goes, nope, that's out.
Right.
Yeah.
To you, Julia. And then he'll send them the final proofs after that. So there we go.
That's smart.
Somebody has put in the questions, and this relates to a question I had anyway. They have put, how do you keep your voices fresh? My question was, are you a responsible actor? Do you do a thorough, full professional warm-up every day? Or are you like me and you hum for 90 seconds and then just like mainline coffee? Right?
Julia,
like,
you go first.
There are certain things I avoid, right? Like, I don't have dairy on recording days, because then it's just giving myself an obstacle that I don't want to deal with. But I also don't, I'm not precious about it. I'm actually, this weekend, I'm at Stagecoach, the music festival, and it's like 104 degrees and dusty. And I'm, trying not to yell. I'm trying to, so for this morning, I had like a nebulizer on, trying to like hydrate again my vocal cords. And that's, so I'm careful, but I'm definitely not, operatic singer level, careful.
Yeah, Edoardo, how about
no,
you?
I'm the same way. I'm careful without being obsessive about it. I kind of hum for maybe 60 seconds, and then I start.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, I've got you by 30 seconds. But it actually raises an interesting point: is that obviously there's the longevity of the voice, like how many hours can you record, and that's important. But I think there's a slight misunderstanding in the audiobook world, is that, what we would call like a pretty voice isn't necessarily what you need. What you need is a voice that tells a story, right? So you need an actor, you need a performer. So to a degree, it's like you don't have to be a model to be on screen. That may benefit you in certain roles, yes, but not everybody is perfectly gorgeous who's in movies and TV, and not everybody who narrates audiobooks has, these
It's perfectly gorgeous.
Is perfectly gorgeous, or has a perfectly gorgeous voice, right? And that's exactly right, because what we're doing is telling stories. And so once I kind of clued into that, I was like, well, I don't need to worry so much about the quality of my voice as opposed to the quality of my storytelling. And that really changed something in how I approached it.
Yeah, I think I've come to that conclusion as well over the years, which is that I'm not interested in doing declamatory audiobook narrating.
Right. And I don't think that's actually all that good, to be honest.
Right. I
Yeah.
like the crackles and the breaks, and
sure.
like you say, it tells the story better than Laurence Olivier. Excellent. Okay, right. Oh, no, I won't ask you that one. I'm going to ask you this one instead. Right, first of all, I'm going to give some context for the audience. So there is a term that actors use called corpsing. That happens when you are on set, on stage, doing a play, doing something, and you find something so hilarious, you just laugh, not as the character, just Julia or Edoardo, just laughs and, potentially ruins the scene. Do you make yourself corpse during recording? Because I really do. Julia.
No.
I don't think I make myself corpse. I think that I sometimes sentences are so funny I can't get through them. So it's not my performance. It's just like as a reader, I'm just like, okay, I gotta try. And you have that feeling where you're like at the top of the mountain, getting ready to like slalom. Like I'm just like I can get through this. That's how I feel at the top of one of those paragraphs. But
Edoardo, have you?
Well, you'll be surprised as somebody who talked about Machiavelli and Camus, but I don't get asked to read a lot of comedy. So I don't find, that's not a real problem of mine. But I have found myself on many occasions getting very caught up emotionally in a scene and having to stop recording because it's too moving. And I know that I've become a little too close to it. And so you have to maintain that slight separation. It's really a high wire act. You're in the story, you're performing it at the same time you're outside of it and you're just presenting it. And so I've gotten too close to it and I can feel myself sort of starting to tear up and I can hear my voice sort of cracking in it. And I've had to stop because of that on more than one occasion.
Well, maybe it's because I do get the privilege of reading quite a lot of comedy, but I do tend to try.
I was gonna say, if I were you, I'd be laughing all the time.
Right.
I try and shoehorn in various voices if it's comedy.
You're amazing.
One book where, I don't know if you remember the more recent Muppets movie with Jason Segel.
Yes, yeah.
So do you remember the alternate version of the Muppets, the Moopits? So I tried to shoehorn Miss Poogie into a book. And she speaks like this all of the time. And I don't know why I did it. I just did it, but I couldn't continue. I just made myself laugh.
Sometimes I wonder if listeners are listening to us. Sometimes just be like, wow, that was a choice.
Right.
Oh, sorry, everyone. We just sometimes lose it. There's not a lot of oxygen in here. Hours go by, no sunlight. Sometimes you really are you're hearing a mental breakdown happening.
Which is fine. That's just part of the course. Right. I've had a question about the stuff you two do with Aud M. I haven't listened. But is it so it's long form kind of journalism, or can you Edoardo, can you tell us a bit about that?
So Autumn records long form articles for places like the New York Times Magazine, the New Yorker, Vanity Fair, Rolling Stone, all kinds of publications. And I guess it's about 5 or 6 years old now. It was acquired by the New York Times and it employs a number of narrators, a lot of names that people would recognize. And I love it, because it gives me I get paid to read something I was going to read anyway, and they're very quick. The turnaround is quick. You kind of get asked to do an article. It happens a day or two later. It takes about an hour. There's a few corrections and then off it goes. It's a wonderful service, and I've enjoyed it immensely. And I think Julia, you and I started with it around the same time, right? When it first launched.
I think so. Yeah. The guys who founded it they did it all themselves, wrote every line of code themselves, like got the licensing from the publications. And then I actually came on as head of production there in 2018. and ran it for a year. And we just scaled it. We were doing 100 articles a month. And that's how much I love the product, is that I was like, sure, I'll work at a startup
Right.
for a year in the middle of my recording and
Why not?
novelist career. Sure, why not? And I still, I mean, this weekend, and like I said, I'm doing this festival, and I prioritize doing this like 16,000 word massive article, because I love it so much.
Yeah.
So it's
Amazing.
really fun. Yeah.
I always find it really fascinating to get a non-fiction, although I would say I think it's harder because it doesn't kind of skip along with characters and dialogue. So it's slightly more intense day, but I like to feel like I'm learning something.
Yeah.
Well, so one of the things, the reason why narrators love working for Autumn, and I'm very proud of this, is like we created the research protocol. So like, as Edoardo said, like the turnaround time is so fast that we do not expect narrators to do their own research. So we have pronunciations and research built into the script. I know. I just wanted to create the best possible place to work. That was my goal.
Yeah.
And I love it so much.
Speaking of the best possible place to work, this isn't to say that audio is better than any other, world in which you can act, but I'm just interested to hear what you particularly love about audio. I think for me, it's super, super, super intimate. Just you and the microphone is here. And the whole time it's not kind of, the shot's too far away, you scale up, you're not in the theatre declaiming. It's just you telling a story to your best friend, and you only have that much space to cover. So I love that. But what do you two love, or have I stolen what you were going to say?
You stole a lot of it, actually. I think there's you hit it right on the head. I think there's an intimacy to audio that theater and film do not have. Theater, obviously, you're in a room with hopefully hundreds, if not 1,000 other people. Film, you're looking at something that is so many different moving parts. You have different actors, you have cinematography, you have music, you have editing, all this stuff. Audio tends to be one voice, and it's also, remember, it's generally consumed by one person, right? You don't have a group of people sitting around to listen to an audiobook. I don't think. I mean, maybe it does happen. So you have this very one-to-one relationship, which you do not have in the other branches of acting, which I think is unique. And I have noticed over the years that I've gotten so many emails from people who have just revealed very personal things about their lives and have said to me, like, how woven into their life I am, or my voice, or this book is. And it's been quite remarkable. And I don't think that would be the case with any of these other forms. People take you with them. They can be listening to you, in bed when they go to sleep, and then they wake up and they go downstairs and they're getting their coffee together and they're still listening to you. Then they jump in the car and they're still listening to you. Then they you get out to the gym and they're still listening to you. Whatever it is, you can kind of travel with them throughout the day, like a, sort of a companion, as it were. And I think that does create an intimacy, which, unfortunately, the strange part about it is that we don't ever actually make that actual connection, right? So you have this intimate thing with somebody who's completely remote. So it's bizarre in that way, but I think you're right that the intimacy of it is what makes it unique.
Julia, have we left you anything to say?
Yeah, no, I everything you just said, and then I would just add that I think part of the reason that it is so intimate is it is so elemental. Like, it is storytelling.
Right.
It is sitting around a fire, storytelling. And as a result, it is just very human and connective. And so yeah, I everything, and that is truly what I mean. Of course, I also enjoy, like, I'm such an introvert and other actors tend to annoy me, and so I really love just acting with myself. Like, I'm not one of those like theater people.
The other thing I'll add to it is, you asked what it is about audio that you like, and I think, we talked about kind of the isolation and the loneliness, which isn't necessarily so great, but there is a lifestyle to it which I very much enjoy. When I really got going in audio was right around the time I was in a series that got canceled, and so that was disappointing, yes, but at the same time I had 2 small children, and suddenly I found this world where I could have a 9-to-5 job. as opposed to commuting to locations halfway across the country or filming at 3 a.m. in Queens or something. And I thought, this is wonderful. And it suited me perfectly. And so that is something I'm enormously appreciative of.
And for Americans, like for this work is, we've spent the last 10-15 years like unionizing it, so we can actually get our health insurance through this, which for actors is a pretty high bar in you know, and on camera. I think like 85% of SAG-AFTRA members never make enough to qualify for healthcare. And because most actors don't work a job in a given year, even if you're a union actor. So we, for that work to be able to give us that and some kind of stability, and yeah, I agree. This was so much more suited to me as a person who like likes to feel like I have some control over my life. just a little bit.
For an actor to do that, right?
It's been wonderful. So
yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think was it Amy Schumer calls it an extroverted introvert. So I can come out all singing, all dancing for about 5 hours, and then I have to go back in my cave for 2 months.
Recharge, just plug in.
Yeah. So it suits me too. I'm gonna just scoot back to, we had a little chat about getting lovely letters from fans, and I have the same, get some incredible letters from people, especially in the pandemic.
Yeah.
Were feeling lonely, lost, people who were ill, and were like, I just feel like I've got you there with me, and it means a huge amount. Have you got any unusual interactions from time with a fan? I recently had someone, and I can't name names, who contacted me to say, I want to propose to my girlfriend, and she loves you so much that I think you'll help my chances.
That happened to me as well. Yes, somebody asked me to record the proposal to their fiance. I said no, because
oh no, I didn't do the proposal.
I was like, I can't be me.
Can you send me a little
Cyrano, some weird Cyrano thing.
I know, yeah.
Well, that's what I mean. And so you have had that exact one.
I've had that exact one, yeah.
Slightly different, trying to get you to do the heavy lifting on the proposal.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure about that.
I was like,
Julia, have you ever had any interesting interaction?
I mean, sure, but like nothing compare. I was a child actor. Like nothing compares to the weird interactions you have in that space. So like everything else is charming. I think as a general, one of the funniest things to come out of this job to me is that I record, you know, enough like rom-coms and romance that a common comment that I receive is that people would rather listen to me do guy voices than the guys, and so they're like, I don't know what this means.
Can you help me work through my sexuality?
But they were just like, how, I don't know why this turns me on so much, but it does. And so I love that about this community, and like of the audiobook fans are so like open to things, because it's such a weird medium. Like it is, you have to buy into this idea that one person's doing all these voices. And so like once your brain kind of acclimates to that and you're just along for the ride, I love that. I do love that buy-in that audiobook fans have. And so all things work. It's like, you know, I just want to hear you do the guy voices. It's funny.
I love that. Have either of you ever, let's start with Edoardo, used a pseudonym? And if so, what for and why?
I have not. I know, just to explain to people, so often audiobook narrators will adopt a pseudonym for a certain genre of books that they want to keep separate from their usual name. It typically is erotica or something of that nature, where they don't necessarily want to associate their name with it. I have not. I will say this, I made a decision early on that I was going to put my name on everything that I did. And there have been some stinkers along the way, which in retrospect, it would have been great to have had a pseudonym on those. But at the same time, I just decided that I was going to be kind of warts and all about this career. And I was just going to always have my name on it. But I certainly don't begrudge people who do have a pseudonym. I think there's a very real reason for it. So.
Julia?
Yeah, so I wrote a book about this. So in my book, it's two people who are recording under two audiobook narrators recording a
This is
romance
just for-
under.
This is thank you for listening. Not
Thank you for
Oxford.
listening.
Okay.
No, yeah, Oxford, that would be hilarious. No, thank you for
Amazing.
listening. They're recording a romance under pseudonym, so they don't know who the other person is, but they, as narrators, like create a relationship recording this romance together. So I've had to explain this thing to people while doing press for this. And I like to take, since we have a captive audience here of 100 people, I like to take this opportunity to remind everyone that please do not out narrators and their pseudonyms online. A lot of people have pseudonyms for very good reasons. Things like they live in small towns,
Yes.
they have weird interactions, an ex-husband is trying to use any opportunity they can to have a custody dispute. There's a lot of reasons that people choose to have pseudonyms. And I chose to have a pseudonym when I started out and was doing a lot of romance because of the child actor fans and like some stalkery stuff. And I did not want these men to be able to hear me read these scenes to them. So as much enthusiasm as you may have when you hear someone's voice and you're like, oh, I know who that is, I know who that really is, and you want to go tell people so you can help them find that narrator, just please respect that people choose to do this intentionally. And some narrators are very open about their pseudonyms, and you can usually Google that and find out if they talk openly about it, great. But otherwise, just keep in mind that it's usually sensitive for a reason. So, okay, I'm stepping down off my soapbox.
No, sorry. Let me just jump in. You make a very interesting point, and there is a bit of a double standard here, is that men often do not have to use the pseudonym as often as women do, as I've found. And for a lot of the reasons you just raised, and it's extremely important to remember and respect that.
Yeah, I have a completely flipped pseudonym story, which is that I never used a pseudonym and was like Edoardo. I was like, look, if I'm willing to take the cash, I'm fine with it. But I was then asked to narrate a book by a former glamour model who said she insisted I use a pseudonym for her book because I had narrated erotica under my own name.
Wow.
And she didn't want to be associated with that anymore.
Wow,
so yeah,
interesting.
that's my interesting pseudonym story.
Interesting.
Right. I'm going to bring it up. We don't have to talk about it for too long, but I would like to hear what you have to say about AI.
Yes.
Because I've got plenty to say, but I want to hear what you two have to say. Julia, would you like to start?
Right. So for people who don't know, I mean, obviously, I think every conversation right now is about AI, but in our industry specifically, it's a looming threat, and it's actually not even looming; it's here. And it's about text to speech. Essentially, that's what it is. It's just fancy text to speech, reading audiobooks. My personal belief is that this was obviously always going to happen. Okay, see, did you hear that Slack sound that comes through? That's actually an Autumn. My pickups are ready, guys.
Right, good.
But I think for me, it goes back to what we were just talking about, this human connection, this elemental connection and it ties into what Edoardo was saying earlier about not just being a pretty voice. And I think that narrators would kind of do well to remember that it was never just about the voice. It was never just about reading the book. We bring our brains to books. We bring our interpretation, our performance. And in that respect, it's not the same product. It's not the same process. I think it might actually give us an opportunity to really differentiate ourselves finally in this industry and say, this is what we do, and it is an art. And because it's different from this, now we have this other thing to point to and say, there's this, but that's not us.
Right.
So that's my probably overly optimistic take on it, and I don't want to minimize how disruptive it's going to be, and it's going to change things, but it's not the same thing.
No, I'll add to it that we're all, worried that AI is going to just trample down everything that we've built and take over. At the same time, you have to be realistic that it is a tool that can actually serve a purpose. And I'm by no means a huge advocate for using AI voices, but if you have some obscure title out there, which nobody was ever going to record, and there are people who are unable to read for whatever reason, and they would like access to this material, that's actually a good thing. So that's one, but unfortunately in the capitalist world, the tool tends to be used way beyond that bottom threshold. And that is the worry. I'm going to throw this out, which was interesting, as I recently got asked, and I did, record something that was written in part with AI writing, which I thought was interesting. So a very talented author decided to create a project along with ChatGPT or another tool. And he worked with it, and he kind of collaborated with this machine and created something. And I thought it was fascinating. At first I hesitated because I said, I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to be a part of anything that takes away a job from, a writer. Then I thought about it, and it's like, well, this is actually a writer using the tool alongside his own talents, right? Which is something that people use technology alongside their talents every day. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to go for it in this case. And it was fascinating to me to see what was created and to get to know him. As Julia mentioned, it's not looming, it's here. And I think what is in front of us is figuring out a way to, again, use a tool that is not going away, which can have some benefits, but which does not destroy, an entire industry. I think there's a way for that to happen. It's going to be very difficult to get to that point, but I do think that exists. So I share some optimism with you, Julia, that this can be done, but we have to be very vigilant as artists, whether we're writers or, there's a screenwriter strike about to happen in Hollywood, and they're all terrified that the next series of, the next season of Succession is just going to be written by ChatGPT, and the producers will be fine with it. So we have to be vigilant about it as creators. Whether you're on screen or behind a mic, look, they can take your face and do things with it as well. I do think that if we are vigilant and we get into a room with the people who are in control of disseminating all this material, that we can do this properly.
Beautifully put. I won't add to it because you put it beautifully and we're running out of time. But yes, lovely. Vigilance is a key word, right? Because no one really knows where this is going to lead.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Right, Pamela has asked a couple of times about what kind of companies you work for mostly. Julia, what kind of companies would you say you work for mostly?
Mostly I do traditional publishing, so big 5 publishing houses, and then within that there's independent audio producers who buy titles from the publishers. So I'm almost 100% traditional at this point. I only have a couple of indie authors that I work with, and Autumn.
Yeah. Edoardo, same?
Yeah, no, the same goes for me. There are really only about 5 publishers, which almost became 4 publishers, I think. They're all with all these mergers happening. So just, people can know this, that the publishing industry is really controlled by about 5 companies. And as you can imagine, most of the work comes through those 5 companies.
Yeah, nice. Do authors have any veto power over either narrator or a portion of the narration? That's from Diane. This varies depending on the author, right? Julia?
It depends on their contract. So you have to be pretty big to be able to have a say over your narrator. Sometimes you can be given options. Yeah.
Edoardo, would you agree?
Yeah, no, it's becoming more and more common for savvy writers to put into their contract that they have some say over who narrates their book. And I think what the industry has realized and the authors have realized is that it's anywhere between 15 to 20% of the sales of a title are through audio now, which is pretty formidable. And so an author is thinking, wait a minute, 1 in 5 people is going to listen to my book, not hold it in their hands. And so they really want to know who that voice is going to be, because that's their product out there. And so I think it's becoming more and more common.
Which is why I've started telling writers, if you can't get into your contract narrator approval, get into your contract now, starting now, so that this will be a thing they have to take out later, that you don't want an AI voice, that it has to be a human narrator.
Right.
That's why I thought it was good to talk about it. The more we talk about it, the more people are aware what's going on, and they can have an influence. What would you say, and obviously it's a huge question, but if you could give 1 or 2 pieces of advice to someone who wanted to get into being an audiobook narrator, the classic. Obviously, I will say to everyone here, there are no rules. Just because someone did A, B, and C doesn't mean it will work for you. have to keep trying different avenues,
Right.
be creative. Yeah. Edoardo, what would you say?
You know,
sure
this
you've
is
done this
a
before.
classic answer, which I think I'm borrowing from Scott Brick, who is one of our colleagues, who's very well known. And he says he always tells people, oh, you want to be an audiobook narrator? Do this, go into a closet with a book, read it for 8 hours, come back out and see if you still want to be an audiobook narrator. And it's not, you know,
For
it's a
minimum
little
wage.
it's a little reductive, but the point is made, right? I have known some wonderful actors. I mean, we're talking, you know, award-winning actors who went into a booth to record a book and just could not do it, right? They're capable of it, but it's a very specific kind of energy that you have to have. And so that is actually a good place to start, is like, do you have what it takes to be in a small room reading kind of by yourself for hours at a time? Because not everybody does. So I would start with that, and then the rest you can answer after that.
Yeah, the mechanics of the job hasn't changed, to Eduardo's point, but the landscape of the job has changed massively. So I don't like to give advice for how to get into it, because I don't know how to get into it now. If I were getting into it now, I think I'd probably be on TikTok more than I pretended to be when my publisher was like, you need to be on TikTok. So I don't know, but I would say that obviously if this whole conversation about AI coming for your job did not like somehow scare you into not wanting to pursue this, yeah, obviously it's a very different industry now. So I don't know.
There are no rules, unfortunately, but it's a beautiful point that I've often said to people about, well, just go home and read for many, many hours and see how you feel.
I mean, I do think you have to start with that before you get into the, how am I going to get a job? Like, can
And
you
not
actually
great
do it?
books. Not because you're not going to be reading books at the beginning. So don't pick your favorite book to read. Don't do that.
Right.
Yeah. It's like going to drama school and spending 3 years on Shakespeare, coming out and getting 2 days on a TV show called
you like fries with
Football
that?
Wives.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Okay, we're running out of time. Right, this is oh no. Oh, yes, this was one of my questions I wasn't going to ask, but somebody else has asked. What do you do if you really don't like the book? How do you keep going?
Ooh, that's one of my favorite questions.
Oh, I thought, oh no, they're not going to want to.
No, because it happens. And you know, what often happens too is if you get into a series, the first one might be fantastic, but by the 5th one, even the writer has given up on the series and it's just horrible. And you're stuck with these characters. And I hope nobody's now combing through which series I've done to see which ones I'm talking about. Honestly, this is where I believe a level of professionalism just has to arise. And you have to say, you know, even though this is not my favorite material, I still have to give it the same attention and energy I would as if I was reading a classic, which I've been dying to read for 25 years. And you just have to be professional about it. Early on in my career, I did a play, and of course, as you can imagine, there was one show where we in the cast outnumbered the audience. And I remember being backstage and I said something to the effect of like, well, this sucks. And, you know, let's just get out of here. And this older actor, he pulled me aside and he said, it doesn't matter who's out there or how many people are out there. You give the same performance. And it really stayed with me. And so I think that applies to the lousy books. It's like, it doesn't matter. You still give it your best.
And also, just because you don't like it, your gran might love it.
Shocked at some of the messages I get for books that I'm like, I don't even remember doing that one or something. And you know, this is everyone's favorite book. I would just add to that what I started doing is I would kind of just start focusing on it from a writing perspective. Like, what is this book here to teach me? Like, what doesn't work about this? And like deconstructing it for me on like a craft level helps me keep the interest of, I'm still giving it my all. I'm still performing it as I would any other book, but I'm also like turning on that part of my brain that's like, why didn't this land? Like, what's happening here? And trying to kind of deconstruct. So
yeah, interesting. Another lot of anonymous attendees, terrified. Someone else says, how do you get your audio projects? Is your industry like acting? Love it when people say that. do acting, where you have agents and auditions? Ooh, a very varied answer to this, Julia.
Yeah, I mean, occasionally an audition, but usually just direct from the producer, who says, "We have a book for you. Here are the dates that we would need it recorded. This is about how long it'll be. Do you want to do it?" And that's really the extent of it. It's a very direct, yeah, BB.
Very simple. It's lovely and simple. Edoardo?
Yeah, no, it's when you reach a certain level of this industry, and I think the three of us have, you tend to just get asked to do a certain amount of things. A certain amount are still, people ask for a sample, like maybe an author wants to make sure that you can handle their particular material a certain way. But at this point of in my career anyway, it tends to be just, so-and-so wants you to do their book, which is great. That's not necessarily the case when you're starting out. There will be a lot of auditioning. You asked earlier about how do you get started, and I don't know exactly either, although I do know that there are a couple of inroads now with AHAB at Penguin Random House, where you can submit auditions for books. ACX also, you can submit auditions for books. And so those did not exist when we were starting out. So that may be a place to start, but you will be auditioning just like you do audition for a part in a TV show or a commercial, and you will not get most of it. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Welcome to acting.
I know, welcome to acting. I always think it's just another branch of acting. You act on in front of a camera, on a stage, or behind a microphone. And it's just three branches of acting with different skills. But the business side of it, in that regard, can be somewhat similar. If you've established a name, then you will get offers. Otherwise, you have to audition, just like you do when you're starting out to get parts in a film.
Yeah, and be patient, because it is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, have we got time for one more? I would probably like to ask, and it doesn't have to be audio, it could be anything you're involved in, but what have you got coming up that you are really excited about? You might already have done this job, or what's on the horizon for fans who are watching that will make them go, "Oh my God, I need to go and see it." Julia, tell me everything.
Come back to me.
Eduardo,
Come back to you.
tell me everything.
Okay, well, I do have, after a 7-year hiatus, I am back on screen. And I have a series coming out. I don't know when exactly. It's in post-production. We filmed last year. It'll be on Hulu. And I can't even say the title because the title may be changing.
Oh.
Okay. No, it was announced in the trade, so it had the working title of Retreat, and that may be changing, I'm not sure, and it'll be out, I'm not sure, but so a lot of unknowns, but it was very exciting for me to go back to a set after 7 years away. Wow. So I know, I was very excited about that.
Nice. Julia?
In 7 years for me too. Where's my series?
Yeah.
I'm actually working on the next book that I'm writing, which is actually a tie-in to Thank You for Listening. I could not let this story go. And for anyone who's read the book, it's the book that the narrators are recording in Thank You for Listening. So a proper romance novel this time. And I just am very excited about that. So hopefully that'll be out in the fall, I'm aiming for. And just a lot of generative stuff going on. A lot of good, exciting things. How about you?
Here she is, me. Oh my goodness. I'm doing a fabulous book next week, the new book by Sarah Hillary, which features a lot of stuff about autism. She has an autistic son and has been diagnosed herself as an adult. And it's a crime novel, but it deals with an autistic protagonist. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be really interesting. So yeah. Hello, welcome back.
Yes, congratulations to all of you. And thank you so much, Julia. I had popped on to ask Imogen that exact question. So thanks for getting it for me. And thank you all for participating in this amazing panel. You all were really funny and great, and I learned so much. And thank you all to all of you participants. It's so great that you could make it. We had the most questions in this session of any of the sessions we've had so far. So I think people were really engaged, and we're so happy that you all could make it and be here with us. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.